My team used to ping pong between emails, messages, and meetings. Now we
Hello everyone, welcome to the Langfocus channel, and my name is Paul. I have to say it every single time. Whoops, there's going to be an echo. Let me turn off the volume on my phone. Yes, welcome to the Langfocus channel, and my name is Paul. And welcome to the first episode of Langfocus Cafe. What is Langfocus Cafe? Well, Langfocus Cafe is just a name that I came up with for this kind of sort of relaxed live stream or video where we can just relax and have a chat about some topic related to language, but maybe not a topic that's big enough or deep enough to get into with a main Langfocus video. Langfocus videos are usually very intense. There's lots of information. Maybe it's overwhelming because there's too much to process in one sitting. So sometimes it's nice to relax and just talk about something a little less intense, a lighter topic. Today's topic is about naming disputes. Let me have a sip of my coffee from my United Arab Emirates mug. I see a few people in the chat saying it's too late to do this. Yes, but remember, I live in Japan, so I'm on a different schedule from you. Unless you live in this time zone. All right, so the topic is about naming disputes. Now, specifically, I mean disputes about geographic names, what to call certain places in the world, and why people disagree about what to call those places. So it might be more like a geography topic, but it's related to language too, because there's meaning in the names that we give to places. So one example of a naming dispute that I want to talk about is this one. There's Kyiv versus Kiev. Both of these refer to the capital of Ukraine. What's the difference? They're almost the same. They almost sound the same. The first one, K-Y-I-V, which is pronounced, I think, like Kyiv, that's a transliteration of the Ukrainian name for the capital of the Ukraine. The other one, K-I-E-V, which I think is pronounced Kiev, is a transliteration of the Russian name of the capital of Ukraine. So, as you may know, Ukraine used to be part of the Soviet Union, the USSR, which was dominated by Russia. That was until 1991 when the Soviet Union finished. So during that time, during the Soviet Union, the Russian language became dominant in Ukraine. It became dominant through policies of the state and migration from Russia to Ukraine. So I've heard Ukrainians talk about this as the Russification of Ukraine, or intentional Russification of Ukraine. Russification is a word that means making it Russian, maybe like a policy of changing Ukraine into a Russian a state of Russia, or making the dominant culture there Russian, making the dominant language there Russian. That's what Russification means. But since leaving the Soviet Union, Ukraine has been trying to reverse that trend and make Ukrainian the dominant language again, even though Russian is still quite widely spoken in Ukraine. And the percentages are actually controversial too. Ukrainians will say, oh, it's 80% Ukrainian, 20% Russian, or Russian speakers will say, no, it's 70% or 80% Russian and only 20% speak Ukrainian, things like that. So the actual numbers are in dispute, and people say that statistics are fake and all this kind of thing. I get a lot of comments like that on my video about Ukrainian and Russian. So anyway, in 1995, Ukraine officially changed the spelling to Kyiv, K-Y-I-V. But the old Russian spelling has still been widely used around the world since then. It's been used in newspapers and media. It's been used in academic writing and in airports. Like if you look at the destination board in the airport, sometimes it's still spelled the Russian way, K-I-E-V, like that. But it's starting to change. It's slowly starting to change based on the efforts of Ukraine to promote this issue. I don't know the percentage of Ukrainians that are really interested in this issue or have a strong opinion about it, but at least some Ukrainians see the old spelling as a relic of the Soviet era, and they want to get rid of that old Russian spelling. So these days, there's actually a social media campaign, and it's like this. Hashtag Kyiv, not Kiev. That's a hashtag you might see on Twitter, or you might see that slogan written on Facebook or in the comments on YouTube. Sometimes people write this slogan in the comments under my video on Ukrainian and Russian. So I guess this slogan, or this social media campaign, is the Ukrainian government's way to encourage Ukrainian citizens to educate the world about their point of view and to express why the name of the capital city should be the Ukrainian transliteration, not the Russian one. You may be wondering, why is it such a big deal? Those two names are almost the same, right? I'm trying to pronounce them correctly. Kyiv versus Kiev, right? Something like that. But why is it a big deal? To outsiders, it seems like they're almost the same. But imagine if you are on the inside of that issue. What do the names represent? So something like the spelling of a place name or the pronunciation of a place name can be a symbol of the country's character and an expression of its desire to distance itself from its past. So in this case, the case of Ukraine, I guess it's an expression of the dominant culture, or what they want the dominant culture to be. The dominant culture in our country is Ukrainian, not Russian. The dominant language is Ukrainian, not Russian. And it's a way of maybe distancing themselves from their past as part of the Soviet Union and distinguishing themselves from Russia. So it's not really the name that's the issue, it's the things that they want to communicate. And that's the case with most of these disputes like this. So here's another similar dispute. Well, it's not exactly similar, but partly similar. It's Macedonia. So Macedonia, you've probably heard that name before. What does it refer to? There is a Balkan nation that calls itself Macedonia. You can see it there in the map in pink color or peach color. But Macedonia is also the name of a region in neighboring Greece, and a historically important region in neighboring Greece. Now, both sides of this issue think that the other side is illegitimately claiming that name, Macedonia, and they think the other side is illegitimately associating themselves with the ancient Greek-speaking Macedonian kingdom and its culture and its civilization, Alexander the Great and all of those things. So both sides claim that that legacy or that civilization is theirs, and the other side are like imposters or something like that. So that's the core of the issue. And you can see that the ancient kingdom on the map with the red line, it covers most of the Greek region of Macedonia, and it covers part of the country in pink that calls itself Macedonia. And in a minute, you'll understand why I'm saying the country that calls itself Macedonia rather than just Macedonia. It became a big diplomatic issue. The country north of Greece used to be part of Yugoslavia, but when when Yugoslavia disintegrated and ceased to be a country, the country calling itself Macedonia became independent, but Greece strongly refused to let them use the name Macedonia, and they blocked them from entering the UN. Greece's objections prevented the country from being accepted into the United Nations for around a year. Believe it or not. In 1993, about a year later, they reached a temporary solution, which was to refer to the newly independent country as FYRM, which stands for the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. So imagine saying that all the time. Greece objects to them using the name Macedonia, so everyone had to say the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, or FYRM, all the time. They're kind of difficult to say. Neither side was really happy with this name. This country that calls itself Macedonia was not happy because they didn't want to be connected with the name of Yugoslavia. And Greece was not happy because they didn't want them to use the name Macedonia. So this was a temporary compromise, and the details of it were quite complicated, actually. It was officially not the name of the country, but it was a description of the country. And it was only to be used until a final agreement could be reached on the name of the country. There was even a dispute about where to seat the new country in the United Nations Assembly, because the seating is alphabetical from A to Z. So that country wanted to sit under the letter M for Macedonia, but Greece objected. Greece suggested they sit under the letter F for FYRM, but that country objected. Finally, they settled on T, T standing for the in the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. So it's kind of funny, they were sitting under the letter T for the. But that shows you how detailed this dispute got, and really like how it affected the relations of these two countries everywhere, like completely. Now, it's a mouthful to constantly say the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, or the country that refers to itself as Macedonia. It's difficult to always say those names to avoid offending someone. So I'm thankful that in 2019, they finally came to a solution. The solution is this. They settled on the name North Macedonia for the country to the north of Greece. Perfect. Easy. North Macedonia. That's so simple to say, easy to remember. And then in Greece, there's Macedonia, and then to the north, North Macedonia. It's easy to distinguish because of the word north. So why did it take so long to come to that solution? It took 17 years. It took 17 years because I think the name is not exactly the issue. Like, the real issue is who claims that ancient cultural civilization. That was the real issue, and I think that's the real reason Greece kept blocking the name of this country. They thought this country was sort of claiming their history. So there's a detail in the agreement. There was a statement in the agreement, a statement that the two groups of people are using the term Macedonian in reference to different cultures and different history. Now, I think what this means, I think the intended meaning of this statement was that North Macedonia does not claim Greece's ancient civilization. I think that's the meaning in that statement. I know there are people who do. I know from the comments on the YouTube channel that there are people from North Macedonia who believe Greece stole their culture or stole their history or something. But I think this statement is what Greece was insisting on, a statement that says we are not talking about the same civilization or same history or culture. It's a different one. So that allows Greece to feel, okay, they're not claiming our culture. I don't quite get it. Me as a Canadian, my attitude is usually like, oh, why don't they just both claim it? Why don't they both claim that ancient culture? Make it fair. But, you know, these things are complicated. I don't know the full history of it, so I can't really speak on it, I guess. Okay, another example. I'm going to do a couple more. Well, one more main example and a couple little ones after that. Another one is this issue. This is about the name of India's most populous country. Sorry, most populous city, not country. It used to be called Bombay. Its old official name in English was Bombay, but now it's Mumbai. Mumbai. If you look at both of those names, they're not very different, right? Like Bombay, Mumbai. I had always assumed that one of them developed from the other one, just through a phonetic change. Because if you look at the first consonant, B versus M, they're actually connected. They're both bilabial. B is a bilabial stop, B, and M is a bilabial nasal, M. To make both of them, you put your lips together when you articulate the consonant. So it would be very simple, very easy for one of them to morph into the other through a phonetic change. So I had always assumed that they were connected. But despite that, there are recorded etymologies for each one that show a different origin, and they both go back hundreds of years. The name Bombay appears in a Portuguese book dating back to 1508, because the Portuguese were the first colonial Europeans to come to India. So what does Bombay mean? Well, it's thought to have come from this phrase, Bombay, which means good little bay, or like good bay. A bay being like a body of water. I don't quite get it. This is according to what I read. It meant good little bay. I don't know that second word, baim, in Portuguese. I think the word for bay is baia, not baim. But maybe this is an old diminutive form because it says little bay. So maybe baim is like a diminutive, but an older one. Something like that. I'm not quite sure about that. But when the British arrived in the 17th century, the Portuguese name for the city became the basis for the English name, Bombay. So the English name came from Portuguese originally. Okay, but meanwhile, the name Mumbai was already being used in the 16th century as well. Mumbai is thought to have come from the name of the goddess Mumbadevi, who's considered the patron deity of the city. And that deity was worshipped by the local people who spoke the Marathi language, or Marathi. How do you pronounce it? Marathi with the t sound. Marathi was the city's original native language. In that language, the name Mumbai has been used since those days for hundreds of years. So it's not a new name, it's just the new official name in English. So that's the distinction. And in Hindi, by the way, it was Bombay, more similar to the English name. And I'm not sure if that's because they adopted it from English, because in the Hindi-speaking areas, maybe they were more connected to Britain. I'm not sure. But anyway, it was Bombay in Hindi. So when did it change? The name of the city was officially changed when a Marathi nationalist party took power in the regional government in 1995. So they were Marathi nationalists. They wanted to disconnect from the colonial past, I guess, and remove that colonial name and replace it with the name from their language, Marathi, because that expresses the cultural heritage of their city and that region. I guess that's the main reason. It's quite predictable that there might be a linguistic dispute in Mumbai because Mumbai is a very multilingual city. There are people from all over India living there. Like I said, the original language was Marathi, but people moved there from all over India. So now I think all, or virtually all, of the languages spoken in India are spoken there. The most common lingua franca is Hindi, from what I understand, followed by Marathi and English. And on the street, I think the way a lot of second language speakers use Hindi is in a form called Bombay Hindi, or Bombay Hindi, which is like Hindi, but a pidgin form of Hindi. Maybe it uses mostly Hindi words, but the grammar is not exactly Hindi. It's influenced by Marathi, and there are some English words and Marathi words, etc. So I think that pidgin is one of the main languages spoken in daily life on the street, at least by a lot of the population. But I think there are pockets of speakers of every language of India in the city. So in all of those disputes, I mean, you get the picture. The dispute is not about which name is the best aesthetically, like which is the most linguistically pleasing name or the coolest name or anything like that. It's really about what the name represents and what meaning people want to express with that name. Another couple examples that I'll throw in, I just added these at the last moment really. One obvious example is Israel versus Palestine. Now this is maybe the perfect example of how the name doesn't only represent the name. Like when the name Israel was applied to the Holy Land, or to the majority of it, it wasn't just a change of the name, it was a redefinition of the country. It was redefining the country as a Jewish country with policies that make it a Jewish country. So it wasn't just changing the name. So these days, a lot of people refuse to use that name, and they say, no, it's Palestine. If they call it Israel, I think to them it represents all of those changes, not just the name. It represents the policies of the country that make it a Jewish country, and it represents things like that, not just a change in the name. And when people refer to the state, not like the geographic area, but when they refer to the state, they often say the Zionist entity. Of course, I'm talking about people who don't accept Israel. They reject or don't recognize it. They call it the Zionist entity when they're talking about like more like the state or the regime, because that term distances themselves from the name Israel, because the name Israel implies that it's a Jewish country. So saying the Zionist entity is a distancing measure, I guess. Another example is this one here, the Sea of Japan. If you look at the question mark, that's in the sea that's often called the Sea of Japan. Internationally, it has been called the Sea of Japan since like the 19th century, I think, but some people reject this. In Korea, in South Korea, they insist on calling it the East Sea. And I get a lot of comments like this under some of my videos, because sometimes I use maps and they have terms like the Japan Sea, and when I use that map, I'm not thinking about the meaning of it. I just wanted to, use a good map. But people see that, the Japan Sea, and they'll comment, it's not the Japan Sea, it's the East Sea. And people in North Korea say it's the East Sea or the Korean East Sea. So again, what's the big deal? It's the same sea. It's mostly in international waters, I think. So what does it matter what it's called? Japan doesn't have sovereignty over it. They don't control most of it. But I guess it's the symbolism again, right? People in Korea feel like Japan is claiming that whole sea if the name Sea of Japan is used. Of course, Japan just says, well, it's been called that for a long time. We don't need to change it. It's fine. But people in other countries nearby don't like it and want to change the name. So that's another example of how the name communicates something. It's not really just the name itself. It's what is the meaning behind the name. So I'm interested in these topics. It's all related to language, because language is basically a bunch of symbols that represent meaning. So when you talk to people, when you use words, you are using them because they represent meaning. And they only have meaning because we agree upon what the meaning is. But people sometimes don't completely agree, right? Sometimes people get a different impression from a certain word, things like that. when it's not about names, sometimes it's an issue of like framing. It's still an issue of like what meaning is being communicated through that word, like what subtle meaning. Like for example, I have a video on Jamaican Creole or patois, and in the video I use the word slave. When I used that word, I was just describing what I thought was the historical situation, right? These people were enslaved, so the noun of that is slave, right? But some people wrote comments saying, don't call them slaves, call them enslaved people. Enslaved people. So why? What's the difference? Isn't it true that an enslaved person equals a slave? But some people are thinking about it as a noun, and they thought if it's a noun, that means it's the person's identity. If you call someone a slave, that means they will always be a slave because it's a noun, right? But if you use an adjective like enslaved, that means it can be reversed, or it can be undone, or they can be freed, right? They won't necessarily be a slave forever, or it's not necessarily like expected if you use an adjective and not a noun. So that's kind of like how people can understand a different meaning from the same word. It still has the same core meaning, but the slight subtle difference of using an adjective and a noun might stand out to different people in a different way. So that's kind of similar to these naming disputes, I guess. That's something I'll probably talk about in a future live stream like this, about framing and how to communicate subtle things with a slightly different word choice and that kind of thing. Okay, so I'm going to have a look at the chat. I've been ignoring it because it's very distracting. If I look down for a second, I can't think about what I'm saying if I'm presenting something. But now we're getting near to the end. Well, we finished the real presentation. So let me have a look and see what's going on in the chat, and maybe I'll reply to some of you. Again, my coffee. This is Langfocus Cafe. Here's my awesome mug, my favorite mug in the world. It was an awesome gift in 2011. I've been drinking from it for 9 years. Okay, so let me look at some of the comments here. They're going really fast. I think maybe I forgot to change the setting to slow down the comments. It's not in slow mode today. Okay, let me just look at my phone. I see someone said, come to Qatar. Yes, I hope I can go to Qatar someday. Even though I've heard some people say that it's quite boring there. Maybe those people stayed inside because it was too hot. Someone said, have you been learning any new languages lately? New ones? Not really. I kind of like to stick to the same language for quite a while because then I can go deep with it and learn it quite well. So the things I've been focusing on for quite a while have been Indonesian. Some people say, Indonesian still? Why? But I don't just want to have chats. I don't just want to have basic chats. I want to reach like a C1 level, a real C1 level, like not just conversation. I want to be able to understand the news, talk about the news. I want to be able to understand like all sorts of topics and speak about them in that language. Even though grammatically it's a simple language, it still takes a lot of time and effort to, reach that sort of level of C1. And then I've been reviewing Hebrew a lot. I used to speak Hebrew better than now, but that was a long time ago when I was a student, when I was like 20 years old, and I'm getting old now, so I'm not 20 years old anymore. I'm reviewing Hebrew by listening to the news every day, listening to podcasts, taking lessons on italki, and doing flashcards, and all of those kinds of things. I want to get back to my level and beyond. I think I actually understand it more than better than I did back then, but I can't speak it as well because I didn't speak it for a long time. Let me look at some more comments. Someone said, how old are you? It's kind of a secret, but yeah. I was in university. Around 20 years ago, so you can do the math, I guess. Someone said, how's the pandemic treating you, Paul? For me, it's not a big change, to be honest, because I often spent so much time at home working on videos and studying. So I'm basically doing a lot of what I normally do, but the difference is my classes that I teach at the university are now online. So basically I'm at home more, but I'm used to staying at home for long hours anyway and working on videos from morning till night. So to me, it's not a big change and I'm not very shocked by it. And I don't really stress about getting sick. I'm not worried about that for myself, but I always wear a mask and do the necessary things to help other people, to keep my community safe. Someone said, what languages do you one day wish to know? Well, I've studied a bunch of languages, but a lot of them were like deep in the past, so I'm not that good at them at the moment. So I want to go back to some of the languages I've studied and get back to my old level and beyond. When people ask me, how many languages do you speak? I always kind of sort of avoid answering or don't know how to answer because I've studied a lot of languages that my level has declined in. So I want to go back and study them. But let's see. So I want my main languages to be like English, Japanese, Indonesian, Hebrew, Arabic. Those are like the core ones, and then like French, maybe Italian, and then I might go back to Tagalog sometime, and then I might add Spanish someday. That's kind of a dream. I don't know if I'll get to them all, but I want to be able to use all of those core languages well again. But yeah, that will take some time. Someone said, do you have a girlfriend? Well, actually, if you look at this right here, you will see that I am now married. I got married on paper last year with Hiromi, my long-term partner. But in August, we had our wedding ceremony on August 22nd. And now I finally feel like we're genuinely married because we had our ceremony in August. So I'm now married. Thank you for the congratulations. Yes, I'm very happy about it. Okay, I'm seeing some people are sending some super chats, but I'm not really seeing them. I'm kind of, it's confusing to look at all the different stuff on the screen. But I see one from Clam, C-L-A-M-M. Have you ever looked into Latin American Aboriginal languages such as Guarani or Quechua? Oh, I have a video on Quechua, if you've seen that. So take a look for the video on Quechua. I think it's a pretty good video. It's a few years old, but I think that one went quite well. That's the main one I've looked into. I mean, I know general information about some others, but that's the main one that I've researched for a video. Were there other super chats? Let me try to review. I don't know where to find the previous super chats. I'm trying to find them. Let me see if I can find all of them on the screen because I want to respond to more of them. I know there's a way, but I don't know where they are because they disappear after a minute. I'm going to have to ask a streaming expert where I can find the super chats that already disappeared so that I can respond to them later. I don't see them, but if you've sent a super chat and I didn't reply to it, I'm sorry about that. Someone in the comments said, what about Geography Focus? Geography Focus, if you don't know it, it's another channel that I did for a while. in the early days of Langfocus, and it was about geography. I haven't been updating that channel or adding new videos because Langfocus takes so much of my time, all my time really. So I don't have time to make videos for both channels, and this is the channel that is more successful and more interesting for me because the topics go deeper. They're not just a list of facts. All the information is connected, and when you're talking about languages, you're talking about systems and how things are all interconnected and how you can use them to build skills. So the topics are much more interesting to me than the geography focused topics. So Langfocus is the main focus right now. Okay, I think I'm going to end the stream in a little bit. I know it's late for many of you around the world. Sorry about that. I live in Japan, so for me it's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but it's difficult to find a time when everyone is awake at the same time. All right, thank you very much for coming and for watching. If you sent a super chat and I didn't respond, I apologize. I'm going to try to find a way to look for them after they disappear. I know there's a way, but I'm not super experienced with streaming yet. But I plan to do these live streams more often. The thing I plan to do is sort of do live streams, leave them up on the channel for a couple days, and then I'll save them. I'll save the archive on Patreon as a sort of benefit for my Patreon members, but they will be on the screen, on the channel for a couple of days. All right, thank you very much. I appreciate you joining me for Langfocus Cafe episode number 1. I'll see you again in the next episode.